I'm still shaking while I think about this. I didn't go into the woods for a story. I'm a regular hiker. I grew up in these mountains, and I've spent my life telling people that the woods aren't scary if you respect them. But I was wrong. I was scouting a new ridgeline in the Monongahela, about 4 miles off the marked trail, just looking for a specific limestone outcrop I'd seen on some old topographical maps. It was one of those heavy, overcast Tuesday afternoons, where the sky looks like wet wool, and the air is so still, you can hear your own heart beating in your ears. The first thing that hit me was the silence. Usually, even deep in the brush, you hear something, a squirrel hitting dry leaves, a blue jay, the wind moving the canopy. But as I crossed a dry creek bed and started up a steep, laurel-choked incline, the woods just stopped. It felt too open. The trees were spaced out in a way that made me feel incredibly exposed, like I was standing in the middle of a stage. I kept looking over my shoulder, not because I heard anything, but because the lack of sound was creating a physical pressure in my chest. It felt wrong, but in a completely mundane, heavy way. I told myself it was just a drop in pressure before a storm. I reached a small plateau and saw it, a single-story cinder-block building. It was just a gray box with a flat roof and a rusted vent pipe. No windows, no gravel path. The ground around the base of the structure had been cleared of all brush, not by a machine, but it looked like it had been hand-scraped down to the bare dirt, like someone had spent days raking it. I stood there for a minute, checking my GPS. I was miles from any private property line. It looked like a utility shed, but there were no power lines leading to it, and no reason for it to exist this far out. Then I heard the metal bolts slide. It was a loud, heavy clack from inside the door. The wooden door didn't swing open slowly. It was kicked from the inside. A man stepped out, a guy in a stained tan work jacket and a baseball cap. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked at me with an expression of pure, focused intent, like he'd been waiting for a light to turn green. He didn't say, "Get off my land," or "What are you doing here?" He just reached back into the dark of the doorway, grabbed a long, heavy piece of iron rebar, and started walking toward me. I hesitated. That was my mistake. My brain tried to find a rational explanation. I thought, maybe he's just a cranky landowner. I should apologize. I should show him my map. I actually opened my mouth to say, "Sorry, I'm just passing through." But I saw his eyes. There was no anger there, just a cold, methodical pace. He wasn't walking to talk. He was walking to close the distance. That 1 second of trying to process a normal interaction in an abnormal situation almost cost me my life. By the time I turned to run, he was already moving fast. The chase was ugly. I didn't have a head start, and I was carrying a 20-pound pack. I didn't run back down the hill toward the creek because he was already cutting off that angle. I dived into a thicket of rhododendron, the waxy leaves slapping my face and tearing at my skin. I could hear him behind me. He wasn't yelling. He was just breathing, heavy, rhythmic grunts, and I could hear the iron bar smashing through the brush. He was moving with a familiarity of the terrain that I didn't have. He wasn't guessing where to step. He knew exactly where the ground dropped off. I hit a patch of loose shale, and my right leg went out from under me. I slid 15 feet down a ravine, my shins screaming as they caught on jagged rocks. I didn't have time to check for blood, but I could feel the warmth of it soaking into my socks immediately. I scrambled up on all fours, gasping for air that felt like it was made of lead. I looked up and saw him at the top of the ravine. He didn't hesitate. He dived down after me, sliding on his boots, the iron bar throwing sparks as it hit the stones. Panic took over, kind of fear. That was a hot, stinging desperation that made my vision go blurry at the edges. I ran blindly, pushing through briars that shredded my forearms. I took a wrong turn, heading higher up the ridge instead of down toward the valley. I realized, too late, I was running into a box canyon, a sheer rock face on 3 sides. I was trapped. I saw a narrow crevice between 2 boulders, barely wide enough for a person. I had to rip my pack off, my keys, my water, my extra layers, and leave it on the ground just to fit. I shoved myself into the gap and pushed back as far as I could, the cold stone pressing against my spine. I held my breath until my lungs hurt, trying so hard not to let out a sob. He reached the clearing a few seconds later. I saw him through the slit in the rocks. He stood there, chest heaving, looking at my discarded backpack. He didn't pick it up. He just stood over it, staring at the ground. Then he started tapping the iron bar against a stone. He knew I was close. He just didn't know exactly where. "I know you're tired," he said. His voice was low and raspy, completely devoid of emotion. "It's a long walk back to the road." I stayed in that crevice for 3 hours. The sun went down, and the temperature dropped into the low 40s. I was in a t-shirt, soaked in sweat that was now turning to ice on my skin. I started shaking so hard, I thought the rocks would rattle. I watched him sit on a log 20 feet away, just waiting. He wasn't bored. He was patient. Every time I thought about moving, he'd shift his weight or tap that bar again. He was waiting for the cold to do the work for him. Around midnight, a heavy fog rolled in. It got so thick, I couldn't see the log he was sitting on anymore. I knew this was my only chance. I took off my boots, tying the laces together and hanging them around my neck. I crawled out of the crevice on my stomach in my wool socks. I moved an inch at a time, feeling the ground with my hands for every twig or dry leaf. I could hear him coughing somewhere to my left, maybe 30 feet away. I spent the next 4 hours navigating the ridge in total darkness. I fell twice, once off a 4-foot drop that I'm pretty sure cracked a rib. I didn't stop. I didn't even feel the pain until the adrenaline started to leak out of me. I followed the sound of a distant creek, knowing it would lead to the logging road. By the time I reached the gravel, my socks were shredded and my feet were bleeding. I reached my truck at 5 a.m. I didn't have my keys. They were in the back. I had to smash the driver's side window with a rock just to get inside. I hot-wired the ignition and drove out of there with the glass still crunching under me. I didn't look back until I hit the interstate. I'm safe now, but I haven't slept in 2 days. My shins are a mess of infections, and my chest hurts every time I move. But the worst part is the GPS. My phone was in the top pocket of the pack I left at the canyon. An hour ago, I got an email notification that my lost device had been powered on. It pinged from a town about 20 minutes from the trailhead. Then it went offline again before I could do anything with it. So, somebody found the pack, or took it. Either way, it didn't stay up on that ridge. That means someone had my phone in their hand long enough to turn it on. I can't stop thinking about that. Thanks for staying until the end. If you're enjoying these kinds of stories, hit like and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. There's a full playlist on your screen right now if you want to keep going. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, sleep well.